Okay, let's just dive right into this. When you picture a Roman legion, what actually comes to mind? It's probably the classic Hollywood image, right? 5,000 soldiers in highly polished armor, marching in perfect formation, carving roads through deep forests, maybe parading through the streets of Rome with the crowd going absolutely wild. We always think about the battles and the glory, but honestly, very few of us ever stop to think about the payroll. I mean, who bought all that grain? Who paid to replace the broken swords? And who covered those massive bonuses when a soldier flat out refused to march without one? In this explainer, we're going to look at what owning a Roman legion actually looked like from the inside. We aren't looking at the battlefield today, we're looking at the ledger. We're going to build a legion from the ground up, and we're going to watch the money leave.
Because here is the really wild part. Before a single sword is ever swung, before your legion has done anything, before it's built a single road or even left its home base, you are already deep in the red. You see, every new soldier who joined the legions got an immediate sign-on payment upon enlistment, just to cover travel and personal expenses. For a brand new legion of 5,000 men, that enlistment bonus cost 375,000 silver coins up front. To put that into modern terms, you were looking at the equivalent of about $45 million in sign-on bonuses alone. We are not just looking at a fighting force here. We are looking at a massive corporate-scale enterprise.
To truly wrap our heads around this, we're going to take a balance sheet approach today. First, the base payroll. Second, gear and deductions. Third, the logistics machine. Fourth, the price of loyalty. Fifth, the retirement time bomb. And finally, number 6, the fiscal engine.
All right, so Section 1, the base payroll and structuring the workforce.
What's really fascinating here is the sheer scale of the wage gap. This isn't just 5,000 identical soldiers earning identical wages across the board. Down at the bottom, you have your ordinary legionaries. These are the guys actually carrying 25 kilograms of gear and marching 30 kilometers a day. Under Augustus, their base pay was 225 silver denarii a year. But look at how rapidly this scales up. The combat commanders, the centurions, made 15 times the base rate. The absolute top centurion, the primus pilus, earned 60 times what a standard foot soldier made. And the commanding general, the legatus, he was bringing in well over 100 times more than the soldier out there digging the latrine trenches. When you add every single pay grade up, a single legion costs roughly 1.58 million denarii a year, just in standard salaries.
To really grasp those numbers, let's anchor this ancient economics to our modern reality. Historians usually compare ancient wages to modern ones by looking at the daily pay of an unskilled laborer. In Rome, an unskilled day laborer earned about 1 denarius a day. In a modern developed economy, that same unskilled worker earns roughly $120 a day. So that gives us a pretty handy modern equivalent for our denarius. If we multiply our legion's annual payroll of 1.58 million denarii by 120 bucks, we get an annual base payroll of approximately $190 million today. And remember, that's before anyone has eaten a single meal.
Which brings us to Section 2, gear and deductions, or what I like to call the closed loop system.
Under the empire, the state actually took direct control of making every piece of kit through these massive industrial workshops. And just look at the intense physical burden on the soldier. Between the iron helmet, that segmented armor, the heavy curved shield, the weapons, and all the camping gear, a Roman soldier carried a marching load of up to 40 kilograms. But here's the thing, gear wears out constantly. Iron rusts, leather rots, shields split in combat. Keeping all this gear from just falling apart required the state to constantly churn out replacement parts. This replacement cycle alone cost the empire around 150,000 denarii a year per legion. That's the modern equivalent of about $18 million just in maintenance.
But as you might have guessed, the state didn't exactly hand this gear out for free out of the goodness of their hearts. We actually have surviving papyrus documents from Egypt that show us exact military pay records. Let's look at one specific soldier named Quintus Julius Proculus. His base salary was paid out 3 times a year in installments of 75 denarii. That's his gross pay. But let's see what happens to that money before it ever actually touched his hands.
The Roman state ran a highly sophisticated payroll deduction system that honestly looks exactly like a modern pay stub. Step 1, they deducted the cost of his food right off the top. Step 2, they deducted the cost of his clothing and those constantly wearing out boots. Step 3, they deducted his required contribution to the unit's burial fund, just in case he died in service. The state essentially fronted the manufacturing costs of the army and then clawed those funds back directly from the men's wages.
And this brilliantly illustrates the trap these guys were in. After all those deductions, Quintus Julius Proculus walked away with a net cash payment of just 23 denarii.
He kept less than a third of his own wages. The rest of it went straight back into the military administrative system. It was a completely closed loop. The state maintained the grand fiction of a generous, highly paid professional army, but in reality, the soldiers were funding much of their own food and gear through forced payroll deductions.
Moving on to Section 3, the logistics machine fueling the legions.
Every single Roman soldier needed about 850 grams of wheat a day, which gave him the roughly 3,000 calories he needed to march 30 kilometers under all that heavy weight. Do the math for the whole legion, plus the cavalry and the servants, and a single legion consumed 5 metric tons of grain every single day. So how do you actually move that? It took a baggage train of approximately 960 pack mules and up to 158 heavy supply carts just to give the legion the ability to march for 18 days without hitting a resupply point. This required a massive 3-tiered network of agricultural surplus, river depots, and mobile supply columns. If the grain ever ran out, entire military campaigns simply collapsed on the spot.
All right, Section 4, the price of loyalty, paydays, and mutinies.
To keep these soldiers loyal, emperors relied heavily on lump sum bonuses called donativa. But what started as occasional gifts very quickly turned into outright extortion. When Augustus died and the military pay was delayed, legions on the Rhine and Danube violently mutinied. Centurions were murdered in the camps. The lesson to future emperors was crystal clear. Money wasn't a reward for loyalty, it was the absolute precondition for it. So just look at this timeline. As the empire aged, competing generals basically bought the throne with bigger and bigger financial promises to their soldiers. The treasury couldn't possibly cover it, so emperors just degraded the currency itself. Under Augustus, a denarius was 95% silver. By the 3rd century crisis, it was less than 5%, basically just a bronze coin with a really thin silver wash. The soldiers naturally demanded higher wages to make up for the inflation, the emperors debased the currency even more to pay those wages, and the cycle repeated until the entire monetary system just flat out collapsed. The legions literally ate the Roman economy.
Next up, Section 5, the retirement time bomb and funding the veterans. When a soldier actually managed to survive 20 to 25 years of grueling service, he received a lump sum retirement package equal to over 13 years of base salary. For a single legion, that created a $72 million annual liability. Now, the Old Republic approach to this was just to confiscate farmland from Italian citizens and hand it over to veterans, which, unsurprisingly, led to massive civil wars and huge instability. Augustus saw this ticking time bomb and changed everything. He created a dedicated military treasury, the Aerarium Militari, which was funded by a strict 5% inheritance tax on wealthy Romans. The elite absolutely hated it, but the alternative was an empire full of unpaid, highly trained, combat-hardened veterans with absolutely no income. It was, quite simply, a revolution waiting to happen.
Finally, Section 6, the fiscal engine, taking the macro view.
So the absolutely crucial point is right here. When you add up that $190 million payroll, the logistics overhead, the equipment replacement, the baggage train maintenance, and that massive $72 million pension liability, the total annual operating cost of maintaining just one single Roman legion comes out to roughly $327 million a year in modern purchasing power. Think about that. That is significantly more than it costs to produce a massive Hollywood blockbuster, and is a full $100 million more than the annual operating budget of the Dallas Cowboys, the most valuable sports franchise in America. All of that for just one legion. And remember, Rome didn't maintain just one legion. Under Emperor Hadrian, Rome maintained 30 active legions, plus their auxiliary units. That is roughly $20 billion in modern purchasing power spent annually, consuming up to 80% of the entire imperial government budget. This brilliantly illustrates a really profound historical truth. Rome lost battles all the time. Enemies annihilated entire Roman legions in the forests of Germany and the deserts of the East. But Rome's true superpower wasn't just its swords or its battlefield tactics, it was its tax administration. When a legion was destroyed, the administration didn't panic. They simply opened the tax registers, raised new funds from customs duties and land taxes, pulled the census records, and built a brand new legion from the ground up within months. The tribal coalitions they fought just couldn't do that.
Which brings us to this really powerful final thought. The Roman Empire was not held together just by the gladius. It was held together by grain receipts, tax registers, and payroll records. As the source material so perfectly puts it, the Roman legion was not just one of history's greatest fighting forces, it was history's most expensive subscription service. And you know, like all subscription services, the moment the silver finally ran out, the coins were debased, and those frontier soldiers stopped getting paid, the subscription was canceled and the empire fell. It kind of makes you wonder, when we look at the global superpowers of today, are we focusing way too much on their weapons and not nearly enough on their ledgers?